everybody, and thank you for joining us on this Intimate Society in Transition webinar. We seem to have a lot of people loving the video, so it kind of works for us, a few people, and some good questions at the end. So I'd just like to thank Darrell for joining me and supporting me actually in this webinar. So the agenda, we're going to have a quick review of the transition cycle, because there's a few new people on this call. Then we're going to be looking at the drivers of anarchy, the winners and the losers in this, and survivors in the GFC3, which we think is coming, and looking at some working from home opportunities, and then there's some questions and answers. So what brings Darrell and I together is we want to make a difference in the world. We've been working together for a number of years, and Darrell very much is my mentor in a lot of the innovation world. And what Pan-Sensit do, we try to remove frustration and anger from a complex world, and that's how we hope to make a difference. And we do it all over the place for many different sorts of organizations across the world for a small company. Okay, the crisis transition cycle. Speaking to somebody the other day, Tom over in the Netherlands, I think, and he said it's kind of like a backdrop, Paul, isn't it? And that's exactly what it is. So you look at this picture, and yes, Pan-Sensit can work out a few of the emotions of where we are, but also you need to sort of look at it and say, where do you think you are? Because there is an impact from a crisis. There's this peak, then this dip. So you have to try and understand where you are and understand what's coming next. And that's the most important, because what we're trying to do is to try to lessen the depth of the disaster and the end-to-end time. So we're going to try to shorten it as well. So how deep can it go depends, because one disaster can be followed by another or a collapse. And if you look at Dmitry Orlov's 5 stages of collapse, very much one will trigger the next one. So we have to, different things appear at different times. So the basic premise is the decisions we make in the crisis period, when there's a lot of shock, excitement, fear, denial of what's really happening. That's when we make decisions, and we make decisions then when we're not best placed to, and it creates those knock-on problems in the disaster zone. So that's kind of what creates the subsequent disaster. So I live in Cornwall on the Atlantic coast, and waves and surfing and wipeouts is definitely, you know, the local language. If you look at the Kubler-Ross grief cycle, you can see the wave there. If you look at the phases of disaster, Zunin and Myers, you can see the wave there, and the hero's journey, flat at the top, down, flat at the bottom, up. It is very much about this wave. And as you're coming down the wave through fear, denial, and frustration, you can get wiped out there in the actual speed of it all, and tumble down through this into this disaster. And you can go round a few times as well. So we have to be careful we understand that. Okay, so just to show you how Pan-Sensit was monitoring this earlier on in the year, we did a big society scrape, 133,000 comments, 4 countries, 277 sources, and 7 million words, or just short of. So we have been able to monitor it. We haven't done it more recently because of the crisis, of people being furloughed and whatever. But back in February, you can see that the dominant emotion was fear. So that placed us about here. We knew that the impact had gone on, and we were in fear. So March, we knew that we were all out there clapping the NHS heroes. They started to emerge, and that's the heroic phase here. So, and we knew back in March there was a lot of frustration. So we kind of put the line, that's where we were, just past peak height in March. So into April, and we're in the honeymoon period, which is this bit up here, where people in the community getting together to help out, lots of people working together, great community feeling in cities, in the country, in the rural parts, and across the world, really. And lovely to experience, and let's hope that can go on a bit longer. And in April, we saw expedient invention. And Darrell, I wonder if you can just comment on this part of the phase. I'm not hearing Darrell.
Hi there. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so the expedient part is all of the problems that appear rapidly just need solutions immediately. And so it's not about innovation per se, it's just solve the problem as quickly as you can. And so I guess one of the iconic ones this year has been the shortage of PPE, resulting in improvisation of using bin bags, for example, as personal protective equipment. And so it's, you do whatever's necessary using the resources that are available to you in order to solve the problem as best you can. But very clearly, invention is not innovation. And so it's, they all tend to be solutions which will solve the problem in the moment, but create a whole bunch of problems downstream, which we'll talk about soon.
Okay, thank you, Darrell. So back in April, growing frustration across the UK and Europe. And then we came into our first trigger event, which was the George Floyd. And there will be a number of further trigger events. Maybe the election last week will trigger stuff off. I don't know. We don't know, but it could seem likely. But there will be more trigger events as we come down this slope. So in May, we started to see some emerging, what Pansensic call drivers of anarchy. Well, I'd probably call it drivers of anarchy because I grew up in the punk era. We have started to see, especially around this whole propaganda, fake news area. Who do we trust? Really difficult to know what's true and what's not true in this world we're living in right now. So we're starting to see the drivers of anarchy. And just to explain the drivers of anarchy, there's two great quotes there. One by Dimitri, who says either things collapse or there's anarchy. One of the two can happen. But the outcome should be good. So it doesn't necessarily mean that anarchy is bad. Anarchy can be good because it can drive change. So back in May, we analysed those comments, 7 million words, and we actually themed them and found out what people were talking about. And we were actually able to build up a picture of society's frustrations. And we started to home in on the known drivers of anarchy. And basically, they all belong at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So obviously, we're only ever one hot meal away from anarchy. So if basically the physiological needs are not being met, not got enough money, the supply chain breaks down on the food, anything like that, people will rise up against it. They're also safety and security. We all need to feel safe. We don't feel safe in the COVID thing. We need to be safe and secure in where we live. And the other thing further up the hierarchy of needs is love and belonging. We belong to a set of values and ethics. If they become threatened, we can rise up. If our social and religious groups who we belong to are under threat, that can drive hate, intolerance, and anarchy can follow. And freedom as well. We're used to being relatively free, and anything that clamps down on that freedom we think is a known driver of anarchy. However, there are more drivers yet to emerge, and we need to keep an eye on that. So the cause and effect, decisions made in the crisis create problems further on. So the Chancellor, that the government's spending the amount of money they're spending on in the UK and across the world. The pre-COVID budget was 55 billion. it's currently on track to be 372 billion and rising quite rapidly, I would suggest. So you can see there that that could create the knock-on disaster. So maybe Darrell, you've done a lot of work in this area in the past. Could you talk us through this slide, please? Hello, Darrell.
Hiya. Yeah, so this is some of the work we've been doing with clients this year. It's one of the nice things about these crisis periods is they are the time for innovation, and it's a good time for everybody to innovate, but it's especially a good time for those that are almost inevitably winners in these situations. So yeah, irrespective of which crisis period it is, if you're in the food industry and essentials, then you win. Yeah, it's the whole idea of a hot meal away from anarchy. Yeah, people need food in their bellies. It's also, I think, about local. Yeah, the more chaotic society is, the worse that top-down command and control type leadership becomes, and so you've got to rely on local. So anything that's done at a local level wins. It's a time when a lot of companies are short of money, of course, and so low-cost alternatives to things that companies have to do again are winners. And I think what that's doing right now is opening up the opportunity for low-cost AI solutions to be adopted. Security always wins. Little luxuries. Humans are such that we like to reward ourselves periodically, and in good economic times we tend to reward ourselves with big things, and in bad economic times we tend to reward ourselves with small things. But we are going to reward ourselves. So I think we're in a period where small rewards becomes the dominant theme. Of course, those people that are winning, I think we can already see rewarding themselves with much bigger stuff. It's down here in the south of west of England. It's difficult to find a property still for sale because everything's been sold in the last 6 months, and those people with money have rewarded themselves with second homes in a nice part of the world. Banks always win. Security, there's usually one sacrificial lamb. So think about Lehman Brothers a few years ago. But banks always win. And then on the right-hand side, some of the things that we're seeing are likely to win this time round. So older consumers, for example, the baby boomers have got all the money, and typically aren't served well by the market. So marketing things for the boomer generation. It may be a time for sustainability again, and I think there are already signs there that here's an opportunity to step in with a sustainable solution, particularly one that doesn't force people to pay more money for it. And perhaps a bit more dangerous, we'll come back to it a little bit later, is the word meaning at the bottom of that picture there, which says that an awful lot of stuff in life that's occurred over the last 15, 20 years is convenience stuff, but is really not meaningful in life. And I think one of the things that the pandemic is doing is making people realize what is meaning and what is meaningful. And so I think a lot of the meaningless stuff in life has already been squeezed out, will continue to be squeezed out, and anything that's meaningful becomes further and further to the fore.
Okay, and this slide, Darrell?
Yeah, I think looking at individuals, I think one of our themes this year again has been the innovation world and the operational excellence world. And if you look at the characteristics of the individual in innovation world, it's a lot of the things that you see on that slide there. So just picking out one or two of those things. Agility in a chaotic environment, you can't know what the direction is very often, and so it's the organizations and the individuals that can work out some kind of a safe to fail experiment, for example, try something, see what happens, learn from that, and iterate their direction. But I think central to that innovator's mindset. Anti-Fragile, the Nassim Taleb book. I think what we realize in the pandemic is a lot of organizations are very fragile, but also a lot of individuals are very fragile. We can see that with the rising anxiety in society. And what anti-fragile is all about from the innovator's mindset is the more stress there is in the system, the stronger people become as a result of that stress. So quite literally, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And it's the time for entrepreneurs. I changed all my priorities this year in terms of the books that we're supposed to be producing, and right at the top of the list came the startup book, because of just lots of people going to be forced into this world of having to set something up by themselves and taking authority themselves and looking after their own destiny. Rural poor is also, I think, interesting down here in the southwest of England. It's that farmer mindset which says that no matter what the situation is, you've got to do something, and you do whatever's necessary to survive. So back to the expediency thing a little bit, but also trying to combine those elements. The idea of the mindset of the farmer, coupled with some of the tools and the skills of trying things out and learning, and building on that learning.
Thanks for picking up on the farmer thing there, Darrell. As an ex-farmer, that's close to my heart.
It never leaves you, right?
Never leaves me. Okay, so cause and effect too. So decisions made here. Everybody got to stay at home, work from home wherever you can. Actually creates a different problem further down the line. So there's a lot more people working from home. So when it comes to looking for opportunities, what we decided to do is to pick an area where we can all benefit from understanding a little bit better, and that is the working from home situation. So we do some always on continuous monitoring of the employee experience for a few different companies. This particular company is a UK business unit of a global company where all its employees are now working from home. The graph you can see is the emotion positivity of the comments, and the red line is the actual improving positivity. So you can see down here in May and June, frustration levels were 34%. That's quite high. It's typically in the low teens. And the excitement level was up 9%. Yeah, that's typically what it is when we analyze employee experience. Go on a couple of months, and frustration and still the number one dominant emotion, but it's dropped to 26% of all the comments. Excitement also dropping. And in the last couple of months, actually, that should say it's number 3 emotion now, down, and it's at 13%. So this company has been positively looking at their frustrations and trying to take them out of the system. And by doing that, they improve the positivity of their employees, which is really important. Also, we understand that we map and understand the themes that the employee are talking about. And you can see here circled, the remote working is the number 3 theme. And you can see from that theme, the blue is neutral, the red is negative, and the green is positive. Most people like remote working. It seems to suit a lot of people, but there are a lot of issues. So there's quite a list here. I'm not going to pick them all out, but a lot of Zoom meetings, missing our friends and our support and the banter. One thing that we do see is a slow disconnect between what's going on, and that makes culture really difficult to keep it going. This particular company did so many interventions to try and keep that culture going. And we talk about onboarding. Well, how do you onboard when all you do is meet people on Zoom? Really difficult. So there's lots going on in this area. One of the ones that worries me as somebody that has to really work hard at my posture is people, lots of comments, not from this particular company, but from other companies that we've worked with, of people sitting in bed or on the sofa with their laptop on their lap working. Now, that is a major health and safety risk. So there's lots of things going on here. Conscientious overdoing it, unconscientious not overdoing it. It can be a real challenge for certain managers managing certain types of work. And the one at the bottom, I think, is an emerging frustration and a worry for people. If I can do my job at home now, and the company gets used to their workforce working at home, doesn't matter where they work. So all of a sudden people are thinking, oh, I could lose my job abroad now. So there are some insights there of working from home. Darrell's going to be talking a bit about Zoom and the conference calling and a few of the opportunities and frustrations in that area. Okay, Darrell?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, so I think talk about winners this year, then Zoom is clearly one of those winners. I think they've had the right product at the right time. Just thinking about the expediency thing, suddenly you've got millions of people being told to work from home, and there's Zoom waiting in the wings, just capable of picking up that load. Interesting too, I think that companies like Cisco with WebEx have really had to start up in their game as a result of Zoom and Teams, etc. And so we've been looking at how's this going to evolve, because we've got the expediency stage. So Zoom stepped in. You've now got the as Paul just described, some of the downsides of that world beginning to emerge. And when the real innovation starts, if we think about what does Zoom do now? Well, they're busy raking in money. That's certainly part of what they're doing now. But there's an enormous innovation opportunity for them. So I think it's one of those situations where we're very likely to see a bifurcation. And the whole idea of EQ is that again, what Paul's analysis and the Pancentic analysis is picking up is that a lot of the frustrations that people experiencing on Zoom is that it's a very quantitative thing. It's a very tangible work thing that we're doing. You don't get the banter, you don't get all of the social stuff that humans need. And so one of those routes is the one that says, okay, is a platform like Zoom, Teams, etc., capable of delivering that kind of emotional intelligence and perhaps some of the feedback loops. So I'll talk about that in a little while. I think the other side of the bifurcation is that there's some kind of a segmentation that says, on the one hand, we'll do all of the tangible stuff, the rational stuff, if you like, on Zoom, and we'll find some other way of doing the other stuff. So quite a number of our clients, for example, are saying that when the pandemic's over, and I think it's already feeling like there's a change in the atmosphere since Pfizer's announcement yesterday that, oh my goodness, yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel now, we can all go back to work. But I think people are realizing that there are certain advantages in working from home, not just from a lifestyle perspective, but also in terms of productivity of the work. And so do we get to a situation where the segmentation becomes, okay, well, we'll spend a couple of days at home working on Zoom, and then we'll go to the office for the other 2 or 3 days of the week. I think the other potential segmentation is, Paul, if you go to the next slide, the sort of results-only working environment that first got exposed to the world in this book, which came out in 2010. And I think for me, it's one of those examples of a piece of thinking that was very innovative. It was done very successfully for a period of time. So the whole thing started in Minneapolis with the headquarters of Best Buy, one of the big retailers over there, where a couple of their employees, so Kelly Bessler and Judy Thompson, employees at Best Buy at the time, frustrated with the workplace and the whole idea of working 9 to 5 and people turning up at work to sit at the desk, but their brain is probably somewhere else. So why do we all do that? Well, the answer at the time was because bosses don't trust us. So we go and sit in the office and are disengaged for most of the day, but we're present, at least physically, and so therefore the boss can tick a box that says, yes, Darrell was at work today. And so what they came up with is this results-only working environment where they had those 13 pillars, if you like, of the philosophy that they built and implemented inside Best Buy. A lot of it is quite radical, I would say, but effectively it took away any obligation in terms of hours worked and focused everything on agreed outcomes that people would deliver. So basically said, these are the outcomes, Darrell, that you need to achieve this week, this month. You decide where you're going to be sitting, what hours you're going to work, and we'll make everything and all the other individuals enable them to do the same, and somehow magically it will all come together and we'll get a much more productive working environment. And of course, that's what did happen at Best Buy. I think the reason that they got to publish the book is that Best Buy gave them a fantastic case study demonstration of an organization that basically freed up their employees to work wherever and whenever they wanted, and saw some pretty impressive bottom line benefits inside the organization. I think at its peak, it was saving them something like 30% of their operational costs in a year. Unfortunately, however, it's one of those situations where, if you go to the next slide, Paul, humans being what they are, we get bored with stuff. And so Judy Thompson still promotes results-only working environment. But unfortunately, in 2013, the CEO of Best Buy switched it off and made everybody come back to the office. Now, why did that happen? I think the answer is two reasons. The first one is that if you look at the Kano diagram here, what the Kano diagram tells us is that from a design perspective, there are certain things that people expect to be there, the musts, if you like. There are things that we want in the workplace or from a product that we go out and buy, and there are things that excite us. So when results-only working environment is introduced, then that's an exciter for people. The important arrow on that Kano diagram, however, is the orange one, which says over time, what used to excite us becomes something that we just take for granted. And so what I'm sure they experienced inside Best Buy, and the reason that the CEO turned the whole thing off, is because people were now taking advantage of the trust that had been given to them. And it's difficult to say that people were goofing off, but what I think we do see is that the problems are arising because a lot of the work that people are being given is meaningless work. And it's one of those things, I think, where they did part of the innovation needed to create success. In other words, they freed people up to do work when and whenever they liked, based on the outcomes they were supposed to do, but they didn't take out the meaningless work. And I think one of the more controversial books of the last couple of years, I think it's on the next slide, Paul, the Bullshit Jobs, basically says that a majority of the work that people do in offices in particular, so a lot of the white collar jobs, when you look at them, they are bullshit jobs. In other words, there's very little meaning inside them. And so it's one thing to say to people, okay, we'll trust you to go and work from home now, and here's a pile of meaningless jobs to go and do while you're there. People will goof off in those situations after a while, and after the initial excitement of the being able to do what you want on a Friday afternoon and during the weekday. But the missing part was it should be used as an opportunity to strip out the meaningless work from the system. Yeah, that's the way I think that you keep people engaged. So it feels like what the pandemic has done this time around is it's forced managers to trust employees. There's no choice but to work from home for many people these days, and so it feels like there's an opportunity here to reintroduce something like results-only working environments, but add in the missing piece that was not there in the initial conception and the initial book, and that is to strip out the meaningless work and encourage people to strip out the meaningless work. There are inevitable dangers in that, I think, but this is the time for doing that innovation activity, and I think it's going to be a pretty hard-brained leader that's going to say, okay, well, we're going to keep on doing meaningless work. This is like absolutely the time in history to start focusing on stuff which is meaningful. So that's one route that the innovation phase could take us to as far as remote working is concerned. So we segment, we do some work at home, some in the office, or we head down this an updated version of this results-only working environment and use it as an opportunity to strip out meaningless work and build on the trust that's been forced onto managers inside organizations. So let's just finally come back to the other side of this story, which is just thinking about, is it possible to get some of the social interaction on platforms like Zoom that humans crave? And does AI play a part of that story? What kind of AI are we thinking about? So next slide describes something that we've been playing around with. I think very often in an innovation context, where does innovation start? It starts with somebody with an extreme problem. And so this is a project that we've played around with for a little while now. This is the police and emergency response, which on one hand is a long way away from working at home on Zoom. But if you'd imagine a 999 call comes into the police, one of the enormous problems they've got is being able to detect hoax calls. It's depending on which part of the country you're in, it can be up to 20% of calls to 999 are hoax calls, and that's an enormous penalty that the police force have got to bear, because you don't know at the time that it's a hoax. You only find out it's a hoax when you've sent out a police unit to the source of the call, and so you've wasted the resource doing that, and of course you've made yourself vulnerable to other incidents that might be real incidents. So how can you detect a hoax call becomes the exam question, if you like, and the innovation opportunity. And so Pancentric becomes a part of that story, in that if you're listening to the narrative that people are communicating to you, then there are ways to identify how true the information that's coming out of their mouths is. Now that's a pretty dangerous thing, of course, and needs to be used very carefully. So in an emergency situation, it is an appropriate use of the technology, I would say. Is the remote working environment ready for that? I'm not sure. But what the idea of integrating things like Pancentric into that 999 situation gives you is a way of recognizing that it is highly possible to understand and to recognize the emotions that people are conveying during conversations, for example. So I think, can we contemplate this sort of capability being transferred into the working environment? Well, I think number one, it would have to be a voluntary thing. It would have to be a situation where everybody that's in a working environment together decides that this is the sort of thing that we want here. But some of the things that are very possible, I think, just from analysing the narrative, are to be able to say, is this person engaged? Is this person disengaged? Speaking as a person that's teaching an awful lot of workshops online these days, then being able to see whether a student or a participant is engaged or not from a thumbnail photograph and video camera image of them is a pretty tough ask. So if people have signed up to, okay, well, we can allow that information to be fed through to the facilitator, perhaps initially in an anonymized fashion, I don't know. But again, there are ways of capturing that information and using it to the benefit of all. Again, trust becomes a big part of this. If students, for example, are disengaged and the person facilitating a session realizes that and is given that feedback loop, then hopefully they can do something about it to re-engage the people that are on the call. End result, everybody wins in that situation. One of the reasons we call pancentric, and the pan part is everything. So measure everything. And back to this 999 situation for a second. It's one thing to capture narrative. What's also perfectly possible these days is to capture the audio signal. On a 999 call, that's fundamentally what you're starting with, in fact, and pick out from that the microtones that help reveal the truth of a situation. Now we're back to trust again, of course, but in that hoped call situation, that's what you're looking to identify, and the microtones turn out to be an extremely good way of picking up whether somebody is telling me the truth or is not telling me the truth. But perhaps more importantly, just translating that into a work environment, understanding whether somebody is feeling anxious, for example, and what their microtones reveal about their emotional state at that moment in time. It's going to require a lot of bravery, I think, but if Zoom wants to survive and thrive in the longer term when people have gone back to the office, then these are the sorts of directions that I think they're going to have to start innovating along, and working to build the trust that is inevitably required in order to make these things work. It's if we try and connect this to the real life situation, the face-to-face situation, what they need to be creating is the equivalent of the water cooler conversation, where the banter, if you like, happens around the water cooler, and can this kind of emotional feedback system enable that to happen? So I think there's lots up in the air at the moment, and that's back to that bifurcation again. Just to summarize, I think there are opportunities in both of those directions. This is the brave one, I think, but we are in that innovation phase right now from a remote working perspective that says we've done the expediency bit. The pancentric analysis that Paul showed has identified that the other frustrations are there. People do like working from home because of the other things that it frees up for them. But there's an opportunity for companies like Zoom and Microsoft Teams to start tackling some of those downsides. And that's, as I say, where the real innovation comes in.
Okay, just to basically support that, going back to this company, and I've only just ordered this, Darrell, this company, in an effort to try and keep the culture going, they were using their conference calling facility to have a virtual pint in the evening.
Nice.
And they're doing virtual quizzes using the conference calling. I would love there to be a virtual jam, a music jam facility, so I can meet up with my buddies and still play. It's that kind of thing that we need to that needs to innovate, so that this excitement level doesn't carry on dropping, because when we stop being excited about going to work, that's when all sorts of other things creep in. So yeah, so the whole thing kind of ties into that particular thing. So that's it for me and Darrell with regards to the webinar. But we have some time for some questions. I think Andy has been looking at that. Andy, you've got any questions?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions that came in. One you've literally just answered in a feat of prophetic webinaring. The question was, notice that the emotion excitement seems to be an important one across remote workforces. Any ideas about how to maintain and increase this across the workforce?
I mean, it is a case of doing things like quizzes. It's doing things like the virtual pint. It's anything you can do to maintain that sense of community, that sense of culture and inclusiveness. Because what we're seeing is that you know, the communication over Zoom. Thank God we got Zoom, and that kind of technology. It tends to be quite formal. It can be usually led by presentations, as this is today. The opportunity for us to chat in a more informal way just doesn't exist. So you've got to try and replace that somehow. Otherwise, culture, I kind of see it as, you know, a culture in an organization is everybody in the same petri dish. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
Sorry. Go on, mate.
Now, one of the things that we've been doing this year, which has worked really successfully, I mean, just back to this idea of meaningful stuff, the realization that things like preparation of food are really meaningful acts. So we've been doing a Friday afternoon, Friday lunch thing where we send around a recipe, everybody makes the recipe, and we have a Zoom call where everybody's eating lunch, which is the same food. So we've all prepared the same menu, and use that as a way of doing the social stuff. So you're eating together the same food, even though you're in 4 or 5 different physical locations.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think you know, it won't be long before we start to see, like at C-level, director of fun and social engagement, you know, because it's that important. I believe so. Okay, next question, Andy.
From Pankaj, can we use the current crisis cycle and evolve now for the next crisis cycle in advance with small baby steps?
I think you can, if I understand the question right. Darrell, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it depends what we're thinking about crisis cycle. I mean, if we're thinking about the generational pattern here, then the crisis cycle we're in right now is with us for the next 3 or 4 years, or say 4 or 5 years, and the one after that is not going to be for another 80 years. So whether it's appropriate to be preparing for something that's a long way into the future, I doubt, honestly. I think I think your picture earlier on, where we're trying to reduce the depth to which we go in this crisis cycle. Back to Orlov for a second. If we end up down at this 5th level of dysfunction, then the world really is in trouble. And so I think there's certainly a lot we can do in the short term to mitigate the risks, both for ourselves individually, but also for our community, in how far we plummet down that collapse cycle. So I think preparing for that, and for me, a big part of that comes back to the farmer thing again, and the innovators mindset of being agile. There's an awful lot that none of us can know at this point in time, and so therefore the only sensible response to that is to develop a mindset that says, okay, we need to try stuff. Let's try stuff, see what happens, learn from that, and hopefully survive well enough that we get to do another iteration of that. So I think that's becoming a life skill that is one really important for all of us.
I think also through each of these stages of collapse, you will see like frustrations that lead to the next, if unresolved, lead to the next collapse. If unresolved, lead to the next collapse. So it's all about understanding the frustrations, the contradictions in your world, whether that's your organization or whether it's your society, and looking at those frustrations and say, well, which of these frustrations can we create a product around, can we create a solution to? So I think we can prepare for it as long as we stand back from the situation far enough and use this kind of backdrop to understand where we are in the whole picture.
I think there's such a desperation to get back to normal times. I think it's palpable in the US at the moment with the let's say Joe Biden victory. It remains to be seen what Donald Trump's going to do about that. But yeah, so Joe Biden, it's like suddenly there's this wave of relief that we can go back to truth now. But yeah, the reality is that Joe Biden is the sort of president that's just going to perpetuate and is part of this disaster cycle. It's the generation model. Joe Biden is a real anomaly. He's an artist generation president, and throughout the previous 45 presidents of the United States, there's only ever been one other president from that generation, and by all accounts, he was the worst president they've ever had, and precipitated the Civil War, which Abraham Lincoln came along and had to fix. So if Joe Biden is the equivalent of James Buchanan, then then we're in for some pretty rough 4 or 5 years.
That's absolutely fascinating, Darrell. And it kind of, I'm wondering if that's leading into the next webinar or not. I'm not sure, but
let's see what Donald does first.
Yeah, let's see what Donald does. Andy, is there any more questions?
Yeah, we do. We've got, does the place where we sit on the wave give us a sense of how susceptible we are as a society to chaos? Can we measure when we are easily triggered versus when we are in a stable societal state where disruptions are easily absorbed? Good one.
That's a good one. Look, if we have the data, if we have the conversations from enough points of view, then yes, we could measure whether that chaos is getting worse or getting better. Absolutely, not a problem at all. It's just, can we secure that data, and can we afford to secure that data as well?
I think Pansensic's had some great projects with clients. So the one that we're doing in Australia at the moment, the food industry there, because that's a network organization, what we kind of get is a granular view of stability and disturbance in a network environment. And so what we're doing there is we're analyzing the anonymized email traffic on a quarterly basis. And so I get to be the one that's putting the reports together. And periodically I'll see that a quarter where things have shifted quite significantly. So frustration's gone up, anger's ggone up, for example, and I'll go back to them and say, well, something clearly happened in this quarter. And the response that comes back is, oh well, so and so left the organization and left on bad terms, and it was kind of disturbing the environment in the rest of the organization. And so I think just from that microscopic version of the story, I think it's very clear that what Pansensic will give you, and particularly measuring things like frustration and fear and anger, and showing and observing when they suddenly start to spike, that there's something changing here, and there's something that needs to be acted upon. I mean, it's the lovely thing with this Australian client is that they do actually act upon the results. So if frustration is going up and if things are changing, then they're using the dashboards to change what they're doing as a management team.
Yeah, a good example, Darrell. We need the data, basically, is the short answer to that one. Any more questions, Andy?
I've got one. Some people do well working from home, others don't. Any ideas about how to identify who falls into which category and then manage it?
Well, I'm gonna be a little bit cheeky here, and say, well, I think those that that really struggle with working at home are those that are very gregarious, are really extroverts. For instance, Andy, you struggled to work at home, didn't you?
It presented a new set of challenges I wasn't expecting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are, we see this in the data all the time, and when it's anonymous data, we can't tell who that person is, but we do know that there is a significant amount of people that really struggle with working at home. It's probably, I would say, if I had to guess, it's probably 25%. So it's not going to work for everybody, but a lot of people absolutely love it. So it's a great question, actually, and the mental health is a new metric that we are working on at the moment, so that we can measure the mental health status of the organization, because we believe that is another kind of disaster area, mental health of society and organization.
Yeah. For me, it comes back to this whole idea of Zoom EQ and trust. People have got to want to sign up to these things and be willing to be analyzed in this way. Do I want my boss to know that I'm comfortable or uncomfortable when I'm sitting on a Zoom meeting with him or her? I'm not sure. It needs to be a pretty good relationship for me to say, yeah, I'm okay for you to measure that sort of stuff. But I think once the trust is there, this stuff is very measurable. There's a whole suite of psychometric tools in Pansensic that are extremely good at identifying a whole bunch of traits about an individual. We often say to ourselves when we analyze some of our own data, how on earth did it know that about me? But what that does say, I think, is you just need to be very careful with this stuff, and there needs to be a level of maturity in the organization to use it. And central to that is trust at an individual level, that this is going to be used for the right purposes and not for the wrong purposes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that.
I just, from my point of view, thinking about new ways of managing the situation. I know we're working with a couple of partners and ourselves developing what we're calling at the minute an empathetic chatbot, which we're expecting to be another way for people to relate their situation on their own terms to the machine. And what we're noticing in some fields of endeavor, for example, the armed forces, where it can be seen as a weakness to admit to anxiety or to having struggles in the mental health space, is that people prefer to relate to the chatbot or the system. And so that level of, I see that as something that's going to evolve. I don't know which or how, in which direction, but certainly, as you were saying, Darrell, that we need new capabilities. I think that's one that's very exciting, especially if it's emotionally.
I think that's a lovely example of innovation. Very often happens with the extreme problems. So the thing that we've been playing around with is PTSD in the US military, and an enormous shortfall of psychiatrists. So you've got an awful lot of sufferers of PTSD and a vast shortage of psychiatrists to look after them. So what do you do in that situation? Well, something like an empathetic AI system becomes the inevitable answer, I think, to that. So much as it's not going to be the same as an actual psychiatrist, if you've got several 100,000 people going untreated at the moment, it's inevitably better than that.
We're saying it's not diagnosis itself, because that's a very tricky area, but it helps inform diagnosis. So
yes,
I think the other thing we need to remember, and I'm doing this straight after this meeting, is that we can still meet up and go for a walk. I'm meeting one of my employees after this meeting. We're going for a walk to chat about things. So nothing replaces that. Nothing replaces that one-to-one stuff, and we can still do it in the right environment. So this technology is great, but face-to-face, nothing beats it.
Yeah, true. I've just another couple of questions come in. One I think follows on pretty well from the sort of chatbot and mental health monitoring. Is there a way where individuals can get feedback of what they feel themselves in real time, so they can reflect in real time using Pansensic? kind of self-awareness mechanism for themselves?
Yeah. This is part of the functionality we will be building into the empathetic chatbot. It's not the near-term stuff. That's a bit further away, but absolutely we'll be able to do that.
So I think you refer to it as Selfheal.
Selfheal. If you look at one of my blogs from a good while ago, being a farmer, I bought a field a few years ago and saw this plant in the field, and I thought, what's that? And the plant's name was Selfheal. And if we think about mental health, really the only person that can actually make a difference is you. If it's your mental health, you have to self-heal. What we think we can do is we can create a system that can actually help you understand where you need to self-heal. And if we think about things like metaphors, we're working on metaphors at the moment, and we're starting to see that some of the metaphors that people use to describe their mental health challenges are rooted in the actual experience that caused the problem. And when you think about that, that's massively powerful. It's very early days in what we've observed, but I'm extremely excited about that, because one of the most difficult things is how do we talk about those experiences in life that have caused mental health problems further down the road. Okay, next one.
I think I've got this is very interesting. We keep thinking we are in a crisis since 2008. Is this just a start? Are we due to have a much greater crisis soon?
Well, me and Darrell have been talking about this for years, and Dimitri Orlov's talking about it, but Dimitri also says nobody likes to listen to a doom monger, and you can be branded as a bit of a doom monger. So I got a small answer to that. I bought a 5-acre field last year, and I keep bees, grow trees, and I've got a big allotment, and I'm preparing for what I think is a tough time.
Yeah, the data point I've been using is COVID-19 is the equivalent of Pearl Harbor in the previous crisis cycle. So we've had Pearl Harbor. Society's jumped off its current S curve and is trying to find its new S curve, but that's going to take 4 or 5 years, I think.
Okay, so everyone buy a field.
Everyone buy a field. We've grown all our own stuff this year. It's been fantastic.
Which is also very good for mental health. When it grows, and plants don't eat it. Yeah.
There's innovation.
Yeah. Right. I think that's the last question. I just wanted to highlight that Kostas has sent across an image of pace layering, saying how it reminds him of Dimitri Orlov's chart. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but I'm sure you are, actually. I forget who I'm talking to.
Yeah, thank you, Kostas. I'm not familiar with it, and I'll have a look after the call. Just like to thank everybody for joining us, and I'm sure at some point we'll be doing another one, but I'm not sure what it'll be about.
Yes, thanks for inviting me, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for the support, Darrell.
Okay, well, thanks for everyone for showing up. The video will be online later today or tomorrow. Please share it with those who think will find interest in it. I think we covered a lot of topics actually beyond, or touched upon them beyond the initial society in transition, especially near the end, about how to manage ourselves and our workforces. So yeah, thank you guys, and everyone look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.